There's a quiet crisis unfolding in the modern world, one you've felt in your bones but might not have named. Look around. Men are lost, adrift in a sea of endless distractions, emotional fragility, and shallow validation. We've traded discipline for convenience, virtue for viral fame, and resilience for comfort. The result? A generation of men who crumble under pressure, who chase fleeting pleasures instead of lasting purpose, who have forgotten what it means to stand unshaken when life demands everything. But here's the truth, this isn't a new problem. 2,000 years ago, the Stoics, those iron-willed philosophers and warriors, faced the same battles we do today. And they left behind a battle-tested blueprint for building masculine excellence. Imagine a man who doesn't flinch in the face of chaos, who meets betrayal with calm, hardship with grit, and temptation with self-control. That's the power of the Stoic masculine frame, a way of being forged in the fires of discipline, virtue, and emotional mastery. This isn't about suppressing emotion or pretending to be invincible. It's about reclaiming the strength to act with intention, no matter how fierce the storm. While modern men scroll mindlessly, chase cheap dopamine hits, and bend to every passing whim, the Stoic stands firm. He knows his purpose, he owns his choices, he transforms obstacles into fuel. Today, we're diving deep into the 25 Stoic Codes that will rebuild your masculine foundation from the ground up. These aren't abstract theories, they're razor-sharp principles honed by emperors, generals, and thinkers who shaped history. You'll learn how to silence the noise of modern weakness, how to turn pain into power, and how to lead with unshakable clarity. This is your invitation to step into the arena, to trade fragility for fortitude, and to become the kind of man who leaves a mark on the world. The crisis ends here. The journey begins now. The first and most fundamental Stoic code for building an unbreakable masculine frame begins not with action, but with perception. Here's the radical truth: the world doesn't happen to you, it happens, period. And the space between what occurs and how you respond, that's where your power lies. The Stoics called this prohesis, the invincible ability to choose your interpretation. Think of it like armor for the mind. A breakup, a job loss, a betrayal. These events are neutral. It's the meaning you assign that turns them into either poison or fuel. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome through wars and plagues, put it bluntly in his private journal: "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. Consider two men facing the same setback, a business failure. The first man spirals into rage, blaming the economy, his partners, even luck. His emotional storm clouds his judgment, making the next move impossible. The second man, he pauses, he asks, "What can I control here?" Maybe it's revising his strategy or learning from the mistakes. Same event, wildly different outcomes. That's the Stoic masculine frame in action. It's not about denying emotion. It's about refusing to let emotion hijack your sovereignty. The ancient warriors knew this instinctively. On the battlefield, panic spreads faster than any weapon. But the soldier who masters his perceptions, he turns chaos into clarity. Modern life bombards us with triggers designed to provoke knee-jerk reactions, outrage headlines, social media slights, the constant pressure to react now. But the Stoic doesn't play that game. He trains his perception like a muscle. Before responding, he asks, "Is this within my control? If not, it gets no rent-free space in my mind." This isn't passivity, it's precision. Because when you filter every challenge through this lens, you stop being a puppet to circumstance. You become the man who, when the room is panicking, stays lethally calm. The one who sees opportunity where others see only obstacles. That's the first step to reclaiming your masculine core. Master your mind and the world falls into place. Here's where most men fail, not in their actions, but in their refusal to claim them. The second Stoic code cuts through the noise of modern victimhood. take radical ownership of everything you do. No blame, no excuses, no hiding behind circumstances. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, put it plainly: freedom is secured not by the fulfilling of desires, but by the removal of desire. What does that mean? A man who makes excuses is a slave to his circumstances, but the man who owns every choice, every failure, every misstep, that's where true power begins. Think of the last time you heard someone, maybe even yourself, say, "It's not my fault. The traffic made you late, your boss doesn't appreciate you, your partner didn't make you react that way." These are the lies weak men tell themselves to avoid the discomfort of accountability. Now contrast that with the Stoic way. When Seneca, one of Rome's greatest thinkers, was exiled by Emperor Claudius, he didn't waste energy cursing his enemies. Instead, he wrote, "A wise man turns all setbacks into raw material for growth." That's ownership, not because it's easy, but because it's the only path to true agency. Modern culture feeds us a poison, the idea that we're owed something, that our struggles are someone else's fault. But the Stoic masculine frame rejects this weakness. Take the warrior King Cotto the Younger, who famously carried his own stretcher after being wounded in battle. When his soldiers offered to help, he refused. A leader who cannot bear his own burdens has no right to command others, he said. That's the essence of ownership, not just accepting responsibility, but embracing it as a badge of honor. Here's the hard truth: every time you deflect blame, you surrender power. Every justification is a brick in the prison of your own making. The Stoics didn't preach this because they were moralists. They did it because ownership is the ultimate leverage. When you stand in front of the mirror and say, "This is on me," you're no longer at the mercy of luck, other people's opinions, or life's chaos. You're the author of your story. So ask yourself, where have you been making excuses? Where have you handed over your agency? Because the moment you reclaim it, you become the kind of man who doesn't just endure storms, he commands them. Comfort is the enemy of growth, a truth the Stoics wielded like a weapon. The third code cuts against everything modern culture worships: embrace voluntary hardship. Not because suffering is virtuous, but because softness is lethal. Think of it as resistance training for the soul. Just as muscles tear and rebuild stronger, a man's character is forged in the deliberate friction of discomfort. The ancient Stoics didn't wait for life to break them. They broke themselves first. Cotto the Younger, the iron-spined senator who defied Julius Caesar, slept on cold stone floors even when he owned a mansion. He walked barefoot through snow, ate meager meals, and wore threadbare robes not out of poverty but principle. His reasoning: to train myself to distinguish needs from wants, so desire would never be my master. Modern men drown in convenience. We outsource struggle delivery apps, thermostat-controlled lives, algorithms feeding us endless distraction, yet wonder why anxiety spikes and purpose fades. The Stoic antidote is brutal simplicity. Seek the burn, start with the body, the most immediate battlefield. Cold showers aren't just about willpower, they're micro-rebellions against the instinct to seek ease. When you stand under freezing water and choose to stay, you're rehearsing for life's bigger fights. Fasting strips away another crutch. Not eating for 12, 16, 24 hours isn't about punishment. It's relearning that hunger won't kill you, that cravings are negotiable. The Spartan warriors trained on empty stomachs because they knew a man who can't master his appetite will never master his fate. But voluntary hardship isn't just physical. It's mental. Delete social media for a week. Sit in silence instead of numbing with noise. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. These are modern applications of Seneca's practice of premeditatio malorum, anticipating adversity to disarm it. The goal isn't self-torture, it's inoculation. Every voluntary hardship is a vaccine against the chaos life will inevitably inject. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle is the way," this is what he meant. By choosing discomfort, you transform fear into familiarity. Here's the paradox: the man who runs toward resistance becomes unstoppable. Navy SEAL don't endure hell week because they love pain. They endure it to prove pain is survivable. The Stoic does the same. He knows comfort is quicksand, so he trains like an athlete preparing for the championship of existence, not with dread, but with the quiet confidence of a man who's already tested his limits. Because when the real storm hits, the man accustomed to hardship won't just endure, he'll advance. Pressure doesn't build character, it reveals it, and right now, it's exposing a brutal truth: most men crack at the slightest resistance. A rude comment ruins their day, a missed promotion sends them spiraling, a traffic jam becomes an existential crisis, but the Stoics, they weaponized pressure. Their fourth code, maintain composure under fire, isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about channeling it with surgical precision. At the heart of this is the reserve clause, a mental framework that separates the unshakable from the unstable. Here's how it works: you pour everything into your effort, then release attachment to the outcome, not as defeatism but as liberation. Take Seneca's final moments. When Emperor Nero ordered his death, the philosopher didn't beg or rage. He didn't even flinch. As his wife and friends wept, Seneca calmly dictated his final thoughts, then opened his veins with the same steadiness he'd used to write his letters. His last act comforting them, that's the reserve clause in its purest form. He'd done his duty teaching, advising, living virtuously, and whether Nero approved or ordered his death was beyond his control. The modern equivalent, the athlete who trains relentlessly but shrugs off a loss, knowing preparation was his domain, not the scoreboard. The entrepreneur who pitches perfectly but doesn't crumble if the deal falls through. Compare that to today's fragility. Men rage quit jobs over feedback. They melt down when their team loses. They demand guarantees before they even try. The Stoics would call this slavery, to outcomes, to approval, to the illusion of control. Marcus Aurelius faced mutinies, betrayals, and plague, yet his journal repeats one mantra: the art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, because it requires readiness to stand firm against sudden attacks. Notice the word readiness. Composure isn't innate, it's trained. Here's the hack: pressure thrives on surprise, so strip it of that power. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, visually rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Before a speech, they'd imagine the crowd booing. Before a voyage, they'd picture shipwrecks, not to dwell in pessimism, but to disarm fear. When the Roman general Scipio prepared for battle, he'd spend hours walking through potential defeats in his mind. By the time the real fight came, nothing could shake him. Today's application: before a big meeting, visualize stumbling over words, then laughing it off. Before a first date, imagine awkward silence and how you'd pivot. Weakness whispers that composure means indifference. Wrong. The Stoics felt deeply, they just refused to be hijacked by those feelings. When Cicero's daughter died, he wrote, "I am not free from grief, but I am free from being conquered by it." That's the masculine frame in action, emotions present but not in charge. Next time stress mounts, ask, what part of this can I influence? Pour your fire into that. The rest, let it go, like Seneca unclenching his fists, because real strength isn't never stumbling, it's never staying down. Words are currency, spend them recklessly, and you'll go bankrupt in credibility and influence. The fifth Stoic code strips away the modern addiction to empty chatter. Speak with purpose or stay silent. This isn't about being stoic in the pop culture sense, mute and emotionless. It's about the discipline of assent, the practice of pausing before your thoughts become speech. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, drilled this into his students with a visceral metaphor. Nature gave us one tongue but two ears, a ratio to observe twice as much as we speak. Picture two men in a heated debate. The first fires off half-formed opinions, reacts to every provocation, and dominates the conversation. The second listens, weighs his words, and speaks only when his silence would be a disservice to truth. Who commands respect? The answer is obvious, yet modern men confuse volume with value. Social media rewards hot takes. Podcasts glorify unfiltered rants. But the Stoics knew better. Seneca warned, speech is like medicine. The right dose heals, the wrong dose kills. The discipline of assent isn't just about restraint, it's about precision. Before speaking, the Stoic asks 3 questions. Is this true? Is this necessary? Is this kind? 3 filters that separate wisdom from noise. Marcus Aurelius modeled this in his Rule of Rome. Amid court flatterers and political schemers, he spoke sparingly, but when he did, entire armies moved. Contrast that with today's leaders who tweet first and think never. Gossip is the antithesis of this code. The ancient Greeks called it skandalon, a trap that ensnares both the speaker and listener. When you dissect someone's reputation, you're not just wasting breath, you're eroding your own integrity. Epictetus, who heard the whispers of Rome's elite as a slave, put it brutally. If someone speaks badly of you, must you stand there chewing on their words like a donkey with thistles? Here's the modern application. Next time you're about to vent, criticize, or jump into a trivial argument, pause. Ask if your words will improve the situation or just your ego. The strongest men aren't the loudest, they're the ones who choose their battles like a general allocating troops. Silence, after all, isn't weakness. It's the loaded gun you don't fire unless the target deserves it. And when you do speak, make it land. The Stoics believed speech should do one of 4 things: teach, clarify, persuade, or uplift. Anything else is static. Think of Cato the Younger, whose speeches in the Roman Senate were so ruthlessly concise his opponents begged him to keep talking, knowing he was deadlier with fewer words. Or Socrates, who used questions like scalpels, dissecting lies without ever raising his voice. This code isn't about muting yourself, it's about amplifying your impact. The man who speaks with purpose doesn't just command attention, he shapes reality. Because when your words become rare, they also become weighty, and in a world drowning in noise, that's the ultimate power. Emotions are not the enemy, but left untrained, they become tyrants. The 6th Stoic Code strips away the modern myth that masculinity means either bottling up feelings or unleashing them without filter. Real strength lies in temperance, the art of transforming raw emotion into directed action. Marcus Aurelius didn't wake up to scroll through news feeds or check his notifications. He began each dawn with a ritual so precise it survived 2 millennia. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. That's not fluffy self-help, it's emotional armor. By anchoring his mind in gratitude before facing the day's storms, he set the tone for mastery, not reaction. Consider 2 men receiving crushing news, a layoff, a betrayal, a failure. The first man spirals, pounding fists, shouting blame, drowning in self-pity. The second takes a breath. He feels the sting. Stoics never denied emotion, but then asks, what does this feeling want me to do? Anger becomes fuel for sharper focus. Fear sharpens his preparation, grief deepens his resolve. That's the Stoic difference. Emotions aren't passengers, they're horsepower. When the gladiator stepped into the Colosseum, his pulse didn't flatline, it accelerated. But the greats channeled that adrenaline into precision strikes, not wild swings. The Stoics employed 3 ironclad techniques for emotional mastery. First, the pause. Epictetus taught his students to insert a gap between stimulus and response, like a swordsman parrying before counterattacking. When insulted, he'd say, "Wait, let me see if this is true. If it is, I'll correct it. If not, why react?" Modern application. Next time your boss criticizes you or a driver cuts you off, stop, count to 5. That tiny window is where choice lives. Second, reframing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The blazing fire makes flames and brightness out of everything thrown into it." A traffic jam isn't ruining your day, it's gifting you time to listen to a podcast or plan your next move. A rival's success isn't a personal slight. It's proof that what you want is possible. Third, and most potent premeditation. Seneca would rehearse losing his wealth, his status, even his family. Not to dwell in darkness, but to disarm fear's fangs. He who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive, he wrote. Try this tonight. Visualize your worst-case scenario: financial ruin, public humiliation, health crisis. Sit with the discomfort until you realize you'd survive. You'd adapt, you'd find a way. That's the Stoic secret, not avoiding emotion, but vaccinating against its paralysis. Modern men are taught to either man up, suppress, or let it out, indulge. The Stoics rejected both extremes. When Roman generals like Scipio Africanus wept for fallen soldiers, they weren't weak, they were human. But when the tears dried, they acted, honoring the dead, securing the living, marching forward. That's the masculine frame in motion, emotions as energy, not excuses. Your rage at injustice, direct it into discipline. Your fear of irrelevance, let it fuel your craft. Your grief over loss, let it deepen your connections. The morning meditation isn't just a routine, it's a rebellion. While most men wake and immediately surrender their minds to dopamine hits and outrage algorithms, the Stoic reclaims his inner citadel. Before the world gets its hooks in, he's already defined his purpose, his boundaries, his locus of control. Try it tomorrow, 60 seconds of silence. Name one thing you're grateful for, one challenge you'll face with calm, one action that aligns with your values. That's not mindfulness, it's mind command. Because the man who rules his emotions doesn't just endure storms, he harnesses their lightning. There's a reason why the greatest Stoics, emperors, generals, philosophers kept returning to one unshakable principle: live according to nature. This isn't about hugging trees or rejecting modernity. It's about aligning your actions with the fundamental design of existence. The Stoics saw nature as the ultimate blueprint. Not just the physical world, but the logos, the rational order woven into everything. To resist it is to row against the current. To embrace it, that's where true masculine power thrives. Start with the body. Nature didn't design men for 8 hours of screen-hunched posture and processed food. It forged us for movement, for strength, for endurance. The Roman legionnaires didn't conquer continents because they prioritized convenience. They marched 30 miles a day in full armor, slept on frozen ground, and ate simple rations. Not because they were masochists, because they understood their bodies were instruments of purpose. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is a shame for the soul to falter when the body still perseveres." Modern applications: ditch the shortcuts, lift heavy, push your cardio until your lungs burn. Eat food that fuels function, not just fleeting pleasure. This isn't vanity, it's obedience to your design. Purpose is another thread of natural law. Every oak grows toward the sun, every river carves its path to the sea. Men are no different. When Seneca said, "No wind favors a ship without direction," he wasn't being poetic, he was stating physics. A man adrift chasing money, status, or others' approval violates his own nature. The Stoics believed each person has a daemon, an inner guiding force. Ignoring it creates the existential void so many modern men try to fill with distraction. How do you find it? Listen to what stirs you when the noise fades. What would you pursue if failure were impossible? What pisses you off enough to act? That's your compass. Leadership, too, is written into masculine DNA not as domination, but as stewardship. Ancient Stoics like Cato didn't seek power. It was thrust upon them because they'd proven themselves in smaller arenas first. Leadership begins with self-command. You can't rally others if you're slaves to your own impulses. Epictetus, though a slave himself, taught that true authority comes from moral clarity. First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. Modern men mistake titles for leadership. Real influence grows from responsibility taken, not demanded. Coach a youth team, mentor someone at work, protect those weaker than you. These aren't optional virtues, they're the natural order. Here's the paradox: living naturally in a synthetic world requires unnatural discipline. The Stoics weren't primitivists, they adapted timeless principles to their context. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but woke before dawn to train his mind and body. Seneca amassed wealth but practiced poverty to stay grounded. Your version. Maybe it's unplugging from digital noise to think clearly, or choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Nature rewards alignment, not with comfort, but with the quiet confidence of a man who knows he's living as he was meant to. Not against the world, but with it. The final test: look at your life through nature's lens. Are you growing stronger or softer, building or consuming? Leading or following? When you align with these deeper currents, effort stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like flow. That's the secret the Stoics guarded. The man who lives according to nature doesn't conquer life. He becomes it. Death is the ultimate truth, the one guest every man will meet, yet most spend their lives pretending isn't waiting at the door. The 8th Stoic Code shatters this delusion. Practice memento mori, remember you must die. This isn't morbid fixation, it's the scalpel that cuts through triviality. The Spartans, those iron-blooded warriors, dined with skulls on their tables. The Romans placed skeletons at feasts, not to depress but to electrify. A man who remembers his mortality doesn't cower, he acts. Consider 2 men in their prime. The first avoids funerals, changes the subject when death arises, and distracts himself with endless scrolling. The second starts each morning with the Stoic ritual. I may not live to see sunset. What will I do with these hours that matters? One is sleepwalking, the other is alive in the truest sense. Marcus Aurelius drilled this into his own mind daily. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. Weak men see this as pessimism. Warriors recognize it as liberation. The Spartans took this further than any civilization. Before battle, they'd shave their heads and polish their shields, not just for strategy, but as acts of reverence. A Spartan knew he might die that day, so he'd make that day a masterpiece. Leonidas at Thermopylae didn't rally his men with platitudes about victory. He told them to dine well, for tonight we feast in Hades. That's the power of memento mori. It transforms time from an abstract concept into a currency you spend with intention. Modern men hemorrhage time on the unimportant arguments with strangers online, resentment over slights, chasing pleasures that leave them emptier. Why? Because death feels distant, abstract. The Stoics weaponized this awareness. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Hold every hour in your grasp, lay hold of today's task, and you will not need to depend so much on tomorrow's." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. Roman life expectancy was barely 30. Every letter could be his last. That urgency fueled his legendary productivity. Philosophy treatises, plays, advising Nero, all while knowing the sword could fall any moment. Here's the paradox: confronting death doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. When Steve Jobs told Stanford graduates, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices," he was channeling pure Stoicism. Death strips away pretense. No one on their deathbed wishes they'd spent more hours at the office or won more Twitter fights. They think of love unlived, risks untaken, words unsaid. The practice is simple but brutal. Keep a skull replica on your desk. The Stoics did. Write your own eulogy. Visit graveyards not in gloom, but to read the dates and calculate how many years those souls didn't get. Then ask, if my end came tomorrow, would I be proud of today? This isn't about fear, it's about focus. The Japanese samurai, steeped in similar philosophy, called it the mind like moonlit water, calm, clear, reflecting only what matters. Weakness hides from death because weakness fears truth, but the Stoic masculine frame, it stands eye to eye with the reaper, and in that unblinking gaze finds something extraordinary: the courage to live. Not as a passive spectator, but as the author of a story worth remembering, because the man who makes peace with the end doesn't wait for someday, he builds his legacy now. The modern world is a masterclass in distraction, endless noise about politics, markets, other people's opinions, even the weather. But the ninth Stoic code cuts through the chaos like a blade. Focus relentlessly on what you control. This isn't passive acceptance, it's the ultimate power move. The Stoics called it the dichotomy of control, a simple but brutal filter for where to invest your energy. Your thoughts, your actions, your reactions, controllable. Traffic jams, critics, the stock market, not so much. And here's the kicker. Masculine energy isn't measured by how loudly you roar about injustice, but by how wisely you choose your battles. Take two men stuck in the same airport delay. The first fumes at the gate agent, tweets outrage at the airline, and lets his blood pressure spike over a cancelled flight. The second opens his laptop, adjusts his schedule, and uses the downtime to plan his next quarter. Same delay, different outcomes. That's the Stoic frame in action, recognizing that while you can't control events, you always control what you do with them. Epictetus, the philosopher born in chains, put it plainly. Happiness and freedom begin with one principle. Some things are within your control and some are not. He didn't say this as a slave to fate, but as a man who'd seized sovereignty over the only real estate that matters, his mind. Modern men waste lifetimes obsessing over externals, algorithms that shadow ban them, colleagues who slight them, parents who didn't praise them enough. The Stoic alternative: audit your mental bandwidth like a CFO auditing expenses. Every complaint is a leak. Every "why me" is a withdrawal from your focus account. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire plagued by war and plague, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Notice he didn't say ignore external events, he said depower them. The practical application is ruthless prioritization. Start with the body. You control what you eat, when you train, how you recover. No time for the gym, that's a choice, not a constraint. Move to mindset. You control whether you view a setback as a lesson or a curse. The entrepreneur who loses a client can blame the economy or refine his pitch. Finally, actions you control: showing up prepared, keeping your word, and doing the work even when motivation vanishes. Navy SEAL don't control ocean temperatures during Hell Week, but they control putting one foot in front of the other until the torture ends. Here's the litmus test. Next time you're frustrated, ask, can I actually fix this? If yes, act. If no, detach. Not with resignation, but with the confidence of a man who knows his energy is finite and precious. The Spartans didn't waste breath cursing the size of the Persian army at Thermopylae. They sharpened their spears and picked their terrain. That's the Stoic masculine frame, a relentless focus on your circle of control, and an iron refusal to let the uncontrollable live rent-free in your mind. Because the man who masters this doesn't just endure chaos, he becomes the eye of the storm. Leadership isn't about chest thumping or Instagram captions. It's about the quiet integrity of a life lived rightly. The 10th Stoic Code strips away the modern obsession with performative alpha male theatrics. Lead by example, not through speeches or self-aggrandizement, but through the unshakable congruence of action and principle. Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who dared to stand against Julius Caesar's tyranny, never rallied crowds with fiery rhetoric. Instead, he lived with such uncompromising virtue that his mere presence shamed corruption into silence. When he walked through Rome's streets, pickpockets stopped stealing. Senators straightened their togas. Why? Because Cato didn't preach justice, he was justice in human form. Modern leadership has been hijacked by hollow spectacle podcast bros flexing rented Lamborghinis, CEOs preaching work-life balance from private jets. The Stoics would have recoiled at this hypocrisy. Epictetus, the former slave who taught Rome's elite, sliced through the noise. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. His students weren't allowed to debate Stoic theory until they could demonstrate it in their daily conduct. Want to teach courage? Show it when adversity strikes. Want to preach discipline? Let your habits scream louder than your words. The contrast between Stoic and modern leadership is stark. Today's influencers demand respect through follower counts and viral clips. The Stoics earned it through arid excellence of character. When Alexander the Great met the philosopher Diogenes sunbathing naked, he asked if the sage wanted any favor. Diogenes replied, "Yes, stand out of my sunlight." In that moment, the most powerful man on earth recognized true sovereignty, the kind that can't be bought or conquered. That's the power of leading by example. It disarms pretense and commands respect without asking. Practical application: start small. You don't need a Senate floor or social media platform to practice this code. Arrive early when you promised punctuality. Stay calm when others panic. Choose honesty when a lie would be easier. These are the silent sermons that shape lives. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, focused on micro moments of integrity. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. His journal wasn't filled with visions of legacy, just relentless self-audits. Did I act justly today? Did I meet frustration with patience? Did my private choices match my public image? Here's the litmus test. Would anyone follow your lead if you had no title, no wealth, no platform? The answer lies not in your resume, but in the quiet moments when no one's watching. The Spartan kings ate the same black broth as their lowest soldiers. George Washington refused a crown, returning to his farm after winning a war. These men understood that real authority isn't taken, it's given by those who see your character in action. So forget motivational posts and staged photo shoots. The world doesn't need more talking heads. It needs men who live their creed so fiercely that others can't help but rise to meet that standard. That's Stoic leadership, not a spotlight to stand under, but a mirror forcing others to confront their own potential. And in a culture drowning in empty posturing, that kind of authenticity doesn't just lead, it transforms. Complaining is the white flag of the soul, a surrender to circumstances disguised as conversation. The 11th Stoic Code, endure without complaint, isn't about suppressing pain, it's about transmuting it into something unbreakable. Consider James Stockdale, the Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam. For 7 years in the Hanoi Hilton, a prison designed to break men, he endured torture, solitary confinement, and psychological warfare. His weapon, Stoicism. While other prisoners cracked under the strain, Stockdale recited Epictetus like a mantra. Lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will. He didn't deny his suffering, he used it. When his captors demanded propaganda statements, he slit his scalp with a razor and beat his face bloody with a stool to make himself unrecognizable for their cameras. No screams, no bargaining, just cold, calculated resistance. That's the difference between silent suffering and weakness screaming for an audience. Now contrast that with modern fragility. A delayed Amazon package sparks rage tweets. A cold office temperature fuels hours of gossip. Men crumble over text messages left unanswered or coffee orders made wrong. The Stoics would have been baffled by this indulgence. Marcus Aurelius, who governed Rome while battling chronic illness and betrayals, wrote in his private journal, "The cucumber is bitter. Then throw it away. There are brambles in your path, then go around. That's all you need to know. No tantrums, no victimhood, just solutions. Endurance isn't just about surviving hardship, it's about dignifying it." The Spartans didn't win battles because they felt no fear. They won because they refused to let fear dictate their actions. When a young warrior complained about his rations, King Agesilaus didn't scold him. He simply ate the same meager portion in silence. The lesson: leadership isn't demanding better conditions, it's thriving in the worst ones. Modern men have forgotten this. They outsource resilience therapy speak, absolving them of accountability, apps cushioning every discomfort, medications numbing natural stress. But the Stoics knew suffering isn't your enemy. Your relationship with suffering is. Practical application: start with the body. Next time you're exhausted during a workout, don't groan, dig deeper. When hunger gnaws, delay the meal by 20 minutes. These are micro-trials preparing you for life's macro battles. Then move to the mind, traffic jam. Instead of cursing, use the time to plan or reflect. Criticism at work, replace defensiveness with "what can I learn?" The goal isn't to erase discomfort, it's to rewire your response. Navy SEAL don't endure Hell Week because they're masochists. They endure it to prove to themselves that pain is negotiable. Here's the paradox society won't tell you. Silent endurance earns respect louder than any boast. When Theodore Roosevelt gave his 90-minute speech with a bullet in his chest after an assassination attempt, he didn't win applause for his words, he won awe for his composure. The men who history remembers aren't those who whined about their circumstances, they're those who transcended them without fanfare, the contractor who works through injury to feed his family. The father who swallows pride to take a night shift, the friend who listens instead of competing in the suffering Olympics. Weakness shouts, strength whispers. The Stoic doesn't broadcast his struggles because his validation comes from within. Like a tree growing rings in silence, his growth is visible only in retrospect. So ask yourself, where have you been complaining when you could have been conquering? Every stifled gripe is a deposit in the bank of your character, and compound interest on dignity pays out in respect no currency can buy. Time is the one currency you can't earn back, yet most men spend it like drunken sailors on shore leave. The 12th Stoic Code cuts through this waste with surgical precision. Value time above all. Seneca, in his brutal masterpiece on the shortness of life, didn't mince words. You act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire. Think about that. Men will stress over a dented fender but squander years chasing shallow validation, mindless entertainment, or grudges that should have died decades ago. The Stoics treated time like a Spartan treated his sword, a weapon to be wielded with intention, never left to rust. Consider two men given the same 24 hours. The first wakes late, scrolls social media for hours, argues about sports stats, and relaxes with binge watching until his brain feels numb. The second rises before dawn, trains his body, invests focused hours in his craft, and carves out time for deep reading and reflection. Same sun, same moon, wildly different lives. That's the warrior's approach to time, not as something to kill, but as something to deploy. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "Stop allowing your mind to be a slave, to be jerked about by selfish impulses, to kick against fate and the present, or to mistrust the future." Modern translation, stop letting distraction hijack your most precious asset. Seneca exposed time's greatest thief, busyness without purpose. The Roman elite of his era were no different than today's productivity addicts racing between meetings, networking events, and shallow pursuits while complaining they had no time for philosophy, what we'd call real growth. His diagnosis was brutal. You're not actually busy, you're just occupied. The difference, a man building a business during his commute is busy. A man refreshing his inbox for the 10th time is occupied. One creates value, the other burns daylight. The Stoics prescribed two antidotes for time wasting. First, the nightly review. Every evening, ask yourself, what did I improve today? Where did I default to distraction, not as self-flagellation, but as tactical analysis? The Spartans did this with their shields, checking for dents after each battle. Modern application, track your hours for a week. You'll find black holes, YouTube rabbit holes, half-hearted work sessions, complaining sessions that solved nothing. That data isn't meant to shame you, it's meant to activate you. Second, the mortality filter. Visualize your deathbed not morbidly but urgently. If you knew you had 1 year left, what would you stop doing immediately? Those trivial arguments, those soul-draining apps, those lukewarm friendships, cut them now. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus planned battles, he'd ask, if we strike here, will this win the war or just the skirmish? Apply that to your time. Does this meeting, this hobby, this conversation move you toward your purpose or just fill the void? weak men confuse motion with progress. They'll brag about being swamped while producing nothing of substance. The Stoic masculine frame demands more. It's the craftsman who turns off notifications to hone his skill for 3 uninterrupted hours. The father who trades after work beers for teaching his son to build a fire. The entrepreneur who quits a stable job to bet on his vision. These men aren't reckless, they're ruthless about time's true value. Practical steps start small. Reclaim your mornings before the world's demands hijack your focus. Audit your social circle. Energy vampires cost you hours in recovery time. Most radical of all, learn to say no without guilt. Not every invitation deserves a yes. Not every opportunity is worth the toll. As Seneca warned, you'll find no one willing to share out his money, but to how many does each of us divide up our lives? The clock ticks whether you acknowledge it or not. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary isn't luck or talent, it's the disciplined allocation of days. Every sunset steals a page from your story. What will today say? Pleasure is the siren song of weakness, an intoxicating lure that's capsized more men than any storm. The 13th Stoic Code doesn't preach puritanical denial. It demands something far more radical. Cultivate indifference to pleasure, not hatred, not fear, but the unshakable ability to enjoy without being enslaved. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who dared exile luxury from Rome's elite, drilled this into his students. One must toughen the body to resist pleasures as well as hardships, for the man softened by bedding and banquets is already in chains. Think about that. The same discipline required to endure pain is needed to resist comfort, because luxury isn't just indulgence, it's anticipation of dependence. Modern men live in a pleasure zoo, endless buffets of dopamine hits, algorithmic porn, next-day delivery for cravings they didn't know they had. The Stoics saw this coming 2 millennia ago. Seneca warned of men who suffer from nothing except their own appetites. The solution: systematic desensitization. The Spartans didn't just train for battle, they trained against softness. Boys slept on reeds instead of beds. Soldiers marched barefoot to harden their souls. Why? Because they knew luxury wasn't a reward, it was a trap. When King Agesilaus visited a lavish Persian tent, he laughed. These men have forgotten that the softest things conquer the hardest. Water wears down stone. Musonius took this further. His lectures weren't abstract, they were battle plans against decadence. When Roman nobles complained about bland food, he served them plain barley bread. When students whined about hard benches, he made them sit on the floor. His point: discomfort is the tuition for freedom. Modern application: try a week without sugar. Sleep on a thinner mattress, delete the dating apps and approach women in person. These aren't punishments, they're exercises in sovereignty. The man who can enjoy a feast but survive on rations owns his appetite. The man who can relish sex but withstand celibacy owns his lust. Here's the paradox: indifference to pleasure deepens joy. The Stoics didn't reject wine, they rejected needing wine to unwind. They didn't shun sex, they shunned being ruled by it. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the world's richest empire, wrote, "When you've savored honey, recall how quickly the taste fades. Soon enough, the sensation is gone and the craving returns." That's not cynicism, it's clarity. The man who trains his palate to enjoy simple food tastes flavors the glutton misses. The man who doesn't fear boredom discovers creativity in silence. Weakness rationalizes indulgence as self-care. The Stoic reframes it as self-sabotage. When Julius Caesar wept seeing Alexander's statue, realizing he'd achieved less by the same age, he wasn't mourning lost battles. He was mourning years wasted in feasts and affairs. Contrast that with Cotto, who drank the same vinegar as his troops during marches and turned down bribes that could have tripled his wealth. His power came not from what he owned, but from what he didn't need. Practical training: start with the body. Skip the post-workout sugar crash. Take cold showers without congratulating yourself. Then move to the mind. Next time you crave distraction, sit with the discomfort until it passes. That itch to check your phone, that's the chain you're breaking. Finally, social tests. Decline the extra drink when the group pressures you. Leave the party while you're still having fun. These are the silent victories that forge real discipline. The ultimate test. Ask yourself, could I walk away from my comforts tomorrow and still be whole? Not with resentment, but with the calm of a man who knows pleasure is a guest, not a master. Because the Stoic masculine frame isn't built on what you consume, it's built on what you transcend. The strongest fortress isn't made of stone, it's built in the mind. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who steered Rome through wars and plagues, wrote of an inner citadel, a mental stronghold where no external chaos could penetrate. This isn't about emotional numbness or isolation, it's about selective sovereignty. A man's strength isn't measured by how much he endures, but by what he allows to endure him. Think of it like a castle with drawbridges. Wisdom gets invited in, drama gets left at the moat. Modern men confuse openness with vulnerability, letting every passing opinion, gossip, or social media outrage breach their walls. The Stoic alternative: razor-sharp discernment. Epictetus, who knew the weight of chains before he taught freedom, put it bluntly: if someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who insults you, allowing it to be troubled and confused. That's the crisis, men surrendering their inner citadel to trivialities. You wouldn't let a stranger rearrange your living room, so why let them rearrange your peace? Boundaries are the architecture of this citadel, not the rigid, joyless kind, but the intentional kind. Seneca, who advised Nero before the emperor turned tyrant, practiced this daily. He'd begin mornings with premeditatio, anticipating the day's potential toxins, from flatterers to frustration, and end with reviewing what he'd allowed in. Modern application: audit your inputs. The friend who only complains, limit his access. The news cycle designed to outrage, mute it. The co-worker who thrives on drama, starve him of ammunition. This isn't avoidance, it's curation. The Spartans mastered this. When an Athenian envoy mocked their meager city walls, King Agesilaus pointed to his warriors: these are Sparta's walls. His meaning: real defense isn't physical, it's psychological. A man who's fortified inside doesn't crumble when life sieges him. Contrast that with modern fragility: men whose moods swing with Twitter trends, whose self-worth hinges on likes, who hand their emotional reins to algorithms. The Stoic citadel rejects that slavery. Here's the tactical blueprint. First, identify your gatekeepers. For Marcus Aurelius, it was his mentor's wisdom lines from Rusticus or Epictetus he'd replay when doubt crept in. Yours might be a mantra, a mentor's advice, or a hard-earned lesson. Second, build the moat. Just as castles use water to delay attackers, use silence to delay reactions. When insulted, pause. When provoked, breathe. That gap is where choice lives. Third, control the drawbridge. Not every thought deserves entry. The ancient Stoics practiced such attention to their mental gates. Before letting an emotion or opinion in, they'd ask, does this serve my purpose? Weakness knocks on every door, begging to be let in. The man with a citadel doesn't ignore the knocking, he chooses whether to answer. When Theodore Roosevelt lost his wife and mother on the same day, he didn't numb the pain or rage at fate. He wrote one line in his journal: "The light has gone out of my life." Then he rode into the Dakota Badlands to grieve in solitude, rebuilding his resilience far from pity's glare. That's the Stoic masculine frame, not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of where those feelings land. The ultimate test: next time chaos comes, a betrayal, a failure, a pointless argument, ask, is this worth a place in my citadel? If not, let it burn outside the walls. Because the man who guards his inner world doesn't just survive the battles, he defines the terms of engagement, and in a world desperate to storm your peace, that's the only victory that matters. Every wall is a door, if you have the courage to kick it down. The 15th Stoic Code flips suffering on its head. transform obstacles into fuel. This isn't motivational wordplay, it's the alchemy that forged legends. Take Demosthenes, the Greek orator who should have been written off before he began. Born frail, orphaned young, and cursed with a stutter so severe crowds mocked him. The Stoics would have called these perfect conditions. Why? Because resistance isn't the enemy of greatness, it's the raw material. While lesser men would have crumbled, Demosthenes filled his mouth with pebbles and shouted over crashing waves until his voice carved through noise. He practiced speeches in underground caves away from distractions, sometimes for months at a time. When his first public address bombed, he didn't quit, he doubled down, studying legal texts by lamplight until his mastery was undeniable. The result, a man history remembers not for his stutter, but for speeches that moved nations. That's the Stoic frame in motion, not despite the obstacle, but because of it. The ancient Stoics didn't just tolerate hardship, they leveraged it. Epictetus, who dragged his crippled leg through life as a slave, turned his limp into a teaching tool. Lameness is an impediment to the leg, but not to the will. His disability didn't weaken his philosophy, it proved it. Modern men face different battles, rejections, financial crashes, betrayals, but the principle remains. A startup founder who's been bankrupt doesn't just recover, he gains an MBA in grit no school can teach. A father who loses his job doesn't just find another, he models resilience for his children in real time. The obstacle becomes the teacher, the wound becomes the compass. Marcus Aurelius coded this mindset into his war journal. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. When barbarians stormed Rome's borders and plague gutted his cities, he didn't curse fate. He wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing." Not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he knew friction strengthens. The blacksmith's hammer doesn't ruin the blade, it hones it. Modern applications. That coworker who undermines you, he's training your patience. The algorithm that shadowbans your content, it's forcing you to craft sharper messages. The injury that sidelines you from the gym, it's teaching you creativity in recovery. History's greatest innovations were forged in necessity's furnace. Beethoven composed his masterpieces after going deaf. Lincoln's humility was carved by electoral defeats. Even the Stoic texts we cherish today survived because Roman senators hid scrolls in walls during persecutions. The obstacle didn't erase their work, it ensured its immortality. Here's the tactical shift. Next time you hit a wall, ask not "why me," but "what does this make possible?" When the entrepreneur James Dyson built 5,000 failed vacuum prototypes, he wasn't failing, he was collecting data. When David Goggins was told he'd never be a Navy SEAL, he didn't plead. He lost 100 pounds in 3 months and broke the pull-up record. The pattern is clear. The men who leave marks don't avoid resistance, they consume it. Weakness sees a roadblock, the Stoic sees a whetstone, that project that fell apart. It just freed you for something better. That betrayal, it just revealed who deserved your trust. Even death, the ultimate obstacle, becomes motivation when viewed through the Stoic lens. Not as an end, but as the deadline that makes today matter. Because the man who learns to burn barriers for fuel doesn't just overcome, he transcends. Judgment is the sword most men wield like drunkards, swinging wildly, cutting what they should protect. The 16th Stoic Code demands surgical precision. Suspend judgment to understand. This isn't about moral relativism or weakness. It's about the intellectual discipline to see clearly before acting decisively. Epictetus, the slave-turned philosopher, framed it as a gatekeeper's duty. First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. Modern men mistake snap opinions for strength, hot takes for wisdom. The Stoics knew better. A Roman general didn't send troops based on rumors he scouted, analyzed, then struck. That's the masculine frame in action, patience as power. Cancel culture thrives on impulsive verdicts, social media mobs convicting in seconds based on headlines, not facts. Contrast that with Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire by a radical principle. When someone offends you, ask yourself, what is their reasoning? Once you see the causality, your anger will fade. He didn't excuse wrongdoing, he sought context before condemnation. When barbarian tribes rebelled, he didn't just crush them, he studied their grievances. Some he defeated in battle, others he made allies. The difference, judgment delayed, was justice refined. This discipline hinges on proherses, the Stoic practice of separating fact from interpretation. Two men witness the same event, a co-worker snapping in a meeting. The reactive man immediately labels him disrespectful or unstable. The Stoic pauses. Is he sleep-deprived from a newborn? Did I misinterpret his tone? Could there be a crisis I don't know about? This isn't making excuses, it's gathering intelligence. The Spartan kings didn't punish deserters without first hearing their accounts, not out of softness but strategic depth. Understanding motives didn't weaken their authority, it sharpened it. Modern masculinity conflates quick judgments with decisiveness. Leaders pride themselves on gut calls while ignoring data. Fathers dismiss teenage rebellion as ingratitude without probing its roots. The Stoic alternative, tactical empathy. Seneca practiced this with Nero, not to appease the tyrant but to maneuver around him. By understanding Nero's vanity and fears, Seneca delayed atrocities for years, buying time to covertly mentor better leaders. That's the power of withheld judgment. It creates space to act with precision, not just react with noise. Practical training. Start small. Next time someone cuts you off in traffic, resist the immediate jerk label. Maybe they're rushing to a hospital. When a friend flakes, don't assume disrespect, consider hidden struggles. This isn't about being naive, it's about being intentional. The legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi waited entire days to duel opponents, not out of hesitation, but to study their patterns. The men who shape history aren't those who judge fastest, but those who see clearest. Weakness needs villains to feel strong. The Stoic needs truth. When Cato the Younger investigated corruption claims against allies, he didn't rally a lynch mob, he demanded evidence. Some accusations proved true, others collapsed under scrutiny. His reputation for fairness made his eventual condemnations unstoppable. That's the paradox. The man who judges least wields moral authority most. Because when he finally speaks, the world listens. The modern world will bait you to react. Algorithms feed outrage, headlines profit from division. The Stoic stands unmoved, not indifferent but discerning. Like a surgeon refusing to operate before diagnostics, he knows premature judgment is malpractice of the mind. So train yourself. Next time instinct screams for verdict, force a pause. Ask what you might be missing, then and only then act, because the strongest men don't judge situations, they master them. The wise warrior doesn't wait for the storm to test his roof, he stress tests it in calm weather. This is the essence of the 17th Stoic Code, premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Far from morbid pessimism, it's the ultimate strategic drill. The ancient Stoics didn't just endure hardship, they rehearsed for it. Like a firefighter running simulations of infernos or a pilot practicing engine failures, masculine men inoculate themselves against chaos by visualizing worst-case scenarios before they strike. Seneca put it bluntly, he who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Consider two soldiers preparing for battle. The first hopes for an easy victory, visualizing parades and praise. The second spends nights mentally walking through every possible disaster, ambushes, failed supply lines, his own capture. When the real fight comes, which one adapts faster? History answers decisively. The Roman general Scipio Africanus didn't just study Carthage's strengths, he obsessed over their best moves. Before facing Hannibal, he'd lie awake imagining his own armies rout the screams, the blood, the panic. By the time they met at Zama, no twist of fate could shake him. That's premeditatio malorum in action, not fear-mongering but fear-proofing. modern men mistake optimism for strength. They hope markets won't crash, marriages won't fray, health won't fail, then crumble when reality strikes. The Stoic alternative: stress test your foundations now. Financial collapse, run the numbers on surviving at half your income. Betrayal, reflect on how you'd rebuild trust or walk away. Even death, yours or a loved one, should be visited in quiet moments, not to dwell in darkness but to disarm it. The Spartans took boys as young as 7 to witness executions. Why? Because familiarity with life's harshest truths breeds unshakable resilience. Practical training begins with mental simulations. Before a crucial pitch, visualize the client scoffing, then plan your graceful pivot. Ahead of a difficult conversation, rehearse the other person's cruelest possible words. The goal isn't to manifest disaster, it's to preempt paralysis. Navy SEAL endure Hell Week not because they expect constant suffering, but because knowing they've survived simulated hell makes real operations feel manageable. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing in his journal, "When you wake, tell yourself, today I'll meet interference, ingratitude, arrogance. None of these things can injure me." He wasn't complaining, he was vaccinating himself. The deeper layer, premeditatio, reveals hidden dependencies. A man who mentally loses his job discovers how much his identity is tied to title and salary. A father imagining his child's grave confronts whether he loves the person or just the role they play in his narrative. These aren't hypotheticals, they're diagnostics. The Stoics knew prosperity hides weakness like fat hides muscle. Only by voluntarily exploring adversity do you uncover where you're actually strong and where you've been papering over cracks. Weakness clings to fairy tales that success will be linear, that loyalty is guaranteed, that the body won't betray. The Stoic masculine frame rejects these illusions. When Theodore Roosevelt's wife and mother died hours apart, his grief was apocalyptic but not unexpected. He'd already written about mortality as life's only certainty. That prior reckoning let him channel anguish into action, fleeing to the Dakota Badlands to rebuild himself through raw physical labor. Contrast that with modern men who fall apart at layoffs or breakups they never saw coming despite life's inherent unpredictability. The ultimate test of premeditatio, it's not just about surviving imagined disasters, it's about discovering the gifts hidden within them. Beethoven's deafness birthed his most revolutionary compositions. Mandela's imprisonment honed his leadership. Your own setbacks, anticipated and navigated in advance, become waypoints rather than dead ends, because the man who's walked the darkest paths in his mind never fears being lost in the real world. He carries the map before he needs it. Diogenes lived in a barrel not because he was poor, but because he was free. While Alexander the Great conquered empires, this ragged philosopher conquered dependency. His entire existence was a middle finger to the idea that men require possessions to be powerful. The 18th Stoic Code, simplify your needs, isn't about frugality, it's about sovereignty. Consumerism is the modern cage, convincing men they're incomplete without the latest car, gadget, or status symbol. Diogenes didn't just reject this lie, he exposed it with a single act, drinking water from his hands to prove a cup wasn't necessary. When Alexander, the richest man alive, asked what he could do for him, Diogenes replied, "Step aside, you're blocking my sun." That's the power of radical simplicity. The luxury-loving king left humbled by the man who owned nothing, yet lacked nothing. Musonius Rufus took this further, turning minimalism into a martial art. While Rome's elite gorged on exotic foods, he ate plain barley bread not as a punishment but as training. His lectures weren't theoretical, they were live demonstrations. One lesson, he made students build their own crude huts, then live in them. A man who can't sleep on the ground doesn't belong on a throne, he warned. Modern men have forgotten this. We've outsourced survival. Uber Eats replaces cooking, apps replace problem solving, credit cards delay consequences. The result? A generation of men who panic during power outages because they've never lit a fire or fixed a leak. The Stoics called this softness the slow erosion of competence by convenience. Consider two men stranded in the wilderness. The first clutches his dead smartphone, screaming for signal. The second, raised on Musonius' teachings, assesses. He identifies edible plants, builds shelter from branches, starts fire with friction. Who survives? More importantly, who thrives? The lesson isn't about wilderness, it's about life. Financial collapse, career upheaval, personal crises, these are the urban jungles where modern men get devoured. The minimalist isn't preparing for apocalypse, he's ensuring no disruption can break him. The Spartans understood this. Boys weren't given cloaks in winter not to save money, but to forge men who'd laugh at cold. The modern trap is artificial necessity. You don't need a 5-bedroom house, you want it. You don't need a luxury SUV, you prefer it. The Stoics distinguished needs: food, shelter, purpose from once granite countertops, designer labels, Instagram validation. Epictetus, the former slave, framed it brutally. Freedom isn't secured by filling your coffers, but by emptying your desires. When Julius Caesar invaded Gaul, he marched with the same gear as his lowest soldier. His tent wasn't larger, his rations weren't richer. That's the paradox. The man who reduces his dependencies increases his range of motion. Practical training begins with subtraction. Try a barbarian week. Wear the same outfit daily, eat the same simple meals, ditch entertainment for manual labor. The goal isn't to adopt poverty, but to disprove necessity. Modern applications: delete shopping apps for a month, fix something instead of replacing it, sleep on the floor occasionally. These aren't sacrifices, they're liberations. Each act proves you're not owned by your possessions. The ultimate test: ask yourself, what could I lose tomorrow without losing myself? The Stoic answer: everything but your character, because the man who owns little controls much. And in a world where consumerism is the new servitude, that's the ultimate rebellion. Honor isn't just a word, it's the blood in a man's veins, the compass that guides his every decision when no one's watching. The 19th Stoic Code strips away all pretenses: act with honor always. Not when it's convenient, not when it's celebrated, but especially when it costs you everything. The Stoics didn't see virtue as one path among many. They called it the sole good, the only thing that couldn't be taken from you, even in chains. Take Regulus, the Roman general captured by Carthage during the Punic Wars. Sent back to Rome to negotiate a prisoner exchange, he was given a brutal ultimatum: convince the Senate to surrender or return to certain torture. What did Regulus do? He stood before the Senate and urged them to keep fighting. Then, knowing the horrors awaiting him, he walked back to Carthage. No shackles forced him. No guards dragged him. He went because he'd given his word. The Carthaginians sealed him in a spiked barrel and rolled him through the streets. Regulus died in agony, but his honor outlived empires. Modern men face different battles, but the stakes are the same. We live in an era of situational ethics, where principles bend to convenience, where everyone does it, excuses betrayal, where loyalty expires when the check clears. The Stoics would have called this slavery. Epictetus, who knew real slavery, taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery starts with an ironclad rule: your word isn't just what you say, it's who you are. The contractor who finishes a job at a loss because he quoted the wrong price. The husband who rejects temptation even when his marriage is strained. The friend who keeps confidences after the friendship fades. These aren't just good deeds, they're the bricks of a life built to last. Contrast Regulus with modern icons. Athletes who tank games for draft positions, CEOs who gut pensions for stock bumps, politicians who switch principles like seasonal wardrobes. The difference: short-term gains versus legacy. The Stoics measured life not in years but in alignment. Marcus Aurelius ruled the known world, yet scribbled in his journal, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be." Be one, not when the crowds cheered, but when the palace was empty and the whispers of corruption slithered through the halls. Honor isn't naivety. The Stoics weren't pacifists, they were warriors. Cato the Younger fought Caesar tooth and nail, but even in defeat, he refused the dictator's pardon. Why? Because mercy from a tyrant was dishonor. He chose suicide over submission, not out of pride, but principle. His last words, "I am master of myself," that's the Stoic masculine frame, the willingness to pay any price to stay whole. Practical application: start small. Keep promises to yourself. The gym session you skip today trains the muscle of betrayal more than laziness. Then escalate. Fire the toxic client eating your integrity. Walk away from deals that require moral discounts. The Spartans had a saying, "With your shield or on it," meaning return victorious or dead, but never without your honor. Modern men might not carry shields, but every compromise is a crack in yours. The ultimate test: ask yourself, if everything was stripped away, wealth, status, even freedom, would your actions still make you proud? Because the Stoics knew a truth modernity forgets. The man who stands firm in his honor doesn't just leave a mark, he becomes unbreakable. Patience isn't passivity, it's leverage. The 20th Stoic Code, cultivate strategic patience, isn't about waiting idly, it's about mastering the art of timing. This is the long game mindset that separates legends from footnotes. Take Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus, the Roman farmer turned dictator. When Rome teetered on collapse, the Senate begged him to take absolute power. He left his plow, saved the republic. Then, just 16 days later, did the unthinkable: he walked away. No coups, no clinging to authority, no golden parachute. Just a man who knew his purpose wasn't to rule, but to serve. Cincinnatus understood what modern men forget. True power lies not in how high you climb, but in how freely you can step back. Modern culture thrives on instant gratification, microwave meals, overnight shipping, viral fame. Algorithms reward reactivity, training men to chase dopamine hits instead of destiny. The Stoics called this akrasia, the weakness of acting against one's better judgment. Contrast Cincinnatus with today's influencers who sacrifice integrity for clout, or CEOs who gut companies for quarterly bonuses. The difference: one planted oaks, the other chases mushrooms, quick to sprout, quicker to rot. Delayed gratification isn't just about resisting temptation, it's about investing in something beyond your lifespan. The Roman aqueducts weren't built in a day, but they watered empires for centuries. Strategic patience is tactical. It's the sniper holding his breath, the chess master sacrificing a pawn, the entrepreneur bootstrapping for years while competitors burn VC cash. Marcus Aurelius spent decades as emperor facing wars, plagues, betrayals, yet never abandoned his philosophy. His journals reveal no frantic pivots, just steady refinement. Time is a river of passing events. Strong is he who stands in it unshaken. Modern men mistake speed for momentum. They quit marriages when the spark fades, abandon careers before mastery, and chase trends instead of craft, the Stoic alternative. Compound growth: a single workout means nothing. A year of training reshapes your body. A decade rewrites your identity. The Spartans embodied this. Boys weren't handed spears at birth, they earned them through years of brutal training. When Persia's king demanded their surrender with the message, "Our arrows will blot out the sun," the Spartan general Leonidas didn't flinch. "Then we'll fight in the shade," he replied. That confidence wasn't arrogance, it was the dividend of patience, years of discipline paying off in history's defining moment. Modern application: the writer who journals daily, not for clicks but clarity. The tradesman who perfects his joints before selling his work. The father who models consistency, not just charisma, for his children. Here's the paradox: patience accelerates success. Warren Buffett's 20-slot rule, imagining you could only make 20 lifetime investments, forces deliberate action. The Stoic version: act as if every choice echoes in eternity. Not because the universe cares, but because you should. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple, he slashed products to 4 core items, focusing on perfection over proliferation. The result: the iPod, iPhone, and a $1 trillion legacy. Weakness demands guarantees, strength builds foundations. Next time you're tempted to rush a business deal, a relationship, a revenge plot, ask, will this matter in 5 years? If not, recalibrate. The oak tree doesn't resent the sapling, and winter doesn't curse spring for arriving late. Trust the process, because the man who masters strategic patience doesn't just endure time, he commands it. Discipline starts in the gym but doesn't end there. It seeps into your bones, your breath, your very way of moving through the world. The 21st Stoic Code, maintain physical discipline, isn't about six-pack abs or deadlift PRs. It's about the raw integration of muscle and mind. Cleans, the philosopher who succeeded Zeno as head of the Stoic school, didn't just lecture, he hauled water nightly as a manual laborer to pay his way. While other thinkers debated in comfort, he sweated under jars, proving philosophy isn't an academic exercise but a full-body practice. His message: a man who can't master his biceps won't master his impulses. Modern men have fractured this unity. We outsource exertion to personal trainers, equate fitness with mirror shots, and treat the body like an accessory rather than an instrument. The ancients knew better. The Spartans didn't lift for aesthetics, they trained for functional lethality. A Greek hoplite's shield weighed 30 pounds, carrying it into battle demanded shoulders forged by necessity, not vanity. The Stoics took this further. Physical labor wasn't just preparation, it was philosophy in motion. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The body should be neither pampered nor broken," he wasn't advocating moderation, he was prescribing integration. Weakness creeps in when the mind lectures while the body languishes. Consider 2 men facing adversity. The first has a library of self-help books but gasps climbing stairs. The second combines deadlifts with deep study, his calloused hands flipping pages of Epictetus. When crisis hits, which one remains steady? Science now confirms what the Stoics intuited. Lifting weights reduces anxiety more than strive for many men. Cold exposure hikes dopamine chronically. Fasting sharpens focus. These aren't biohacks, they're reclamations of biological design. The Roman legionnaire marching 20 miles daily didn't need mindfulness apps. His movement was meditation. Practical application: marry motion to meaning. Read Seneca while walking, not scrolling. Practice ambulatory meditation, problem solving during rucks or runs. Or take a page from the Spartans, train barefoot occasionally to reconnect with terrain. The goal isn't punishment, it's presence. Modern distractions divorce men from their physicality. We slump over screens, our posture whispering submission. The Stoic alternative: stand like you own gravity. Breathe like you're fueling a furnace. Make every rep a rebellion against passivity. Here's the deeper layer: physical discipline is moral armor. When Cleans carried those water jars, he wasn't just earning coins, he was proving no work was beneath him. The CEO who scrubs his own floors or the lawyer who splits his own firewood understands this. Comfort breeds entitlement, sweat cultivates humility. The Spartans forced kings to eat the same black broth as their soldiers because privilege corrupts when it divorces leaders from lived experience. Weakness whispers that manual labor is beneath evolved men. But ask any special forces operator. Elite warriors still dig trenches by hand, not because shovels build muscle, but because blisters build character. The Stoic masculine frame doesn't shy from dirt. It wears it as a reminder. Refinement without ruggedness is decoration. So lift, but also chop wood. Run, but also fix what's broken. Let your hands prove your philosophy isn't just words, it's work, because the man whose discipline spans brain and brawn doesn't just think clearly, he stands unshaken. Every battlefield has 2 casualties: the defeated and the victor who won the wrong war. The 22nd Stoic Code, choose your battles wisely, isn't about avoiding conflict, it's about strategic selectivity. The Romans didn't conquer the Mediterranean by fighting every tribe they encountered. They allied with some, ignored others, and crushed only those who threatened their destiny. This is oikeiosis in action, the Stoic art of discerning what truly belongs to your sphere of concern. Modern men mistake masculinity for constant engagement, arguing with strangers online, retaliating against slights, chasing competitions that drain more than they build. The Stoic alternative: measure every potential conflict against one question: does this serve my purpose or just my pride? Take Scipio Africanus, the general who defeated Hannibal. While lesser commanders wasted legions on symbolic skirmishes, Scipio refused to engage Carthage's forces directly for years. Instead, he starved their supply lines, forged alliances with Numidian cavalry, and let Hannibal's army rot in Italy while he struck at their homeland. His critics called it cowardice. History calls it genius. The lesson: victory often looks like not taking the bait. Modern application: that co-worker who needles you during meetings isn't an enemy, he's a distraction. The social media troll isn't worth your keyboard strokes. Even in personal relationships, not every provocation deserves a response. The Spartans had a saying: a lion doesn't turn around when a small dog barks. Discernment hinges on prosocial versus egoic conflicts. The Stoics celebrated fighting for justice, Cato opposing Caesar's tyranny, Regulus returning to Carthage, but mocked duels over insult. Epictetus, who'd been crippled by his master's brutality, taught: if someone tries to drag you into battle, don't resist, just refuse to fight. His example: imagine someone shouts that you're a donkey. You don't prove you're human, you act like one and walk away. Modern men drown in egoic battles, road rage, bar brawls, Twitter feuds, while neglecting the prosocial wars, protecting their families, building their legacies, defending truths bigger than themselves. The Roman legion's testudo formation offers a physical metaphor. When arrows rained down, soldiers didn't scatter or charge. They locked shields overhead, creating an armored shell. They absorbed what they had to, ignored what they could, and advanced only when the path was clear. That's the masculine frame in motion, not avoiding fire but controlling its impact. Modern men lack this discipline. They'll spend hours debating politics with Uncle Frank at Thanksgiving, but won't confront the friend drinking himself into oblivion. They'll rage at a refereeing decision during a pickup game, but tolerate mediocrity in their careers. Practical training begins with the Stoic triage. 1. Non-negotiable engagements: defending family, core values. 2. Strategic investments, business rivalries, skill competitions. 3. Noise, everything else. Marcus Aurelius applied this as emperor. When senators gossiped, he ignored them. When barbarians threatened borders, he crushed them. When plague struck, he emptied the treasury to save his people. His journal captures the mentality. Ask yourself, does this deserve my energy? If not, step over it like a rock in the road. Weakness confuses choosing battles with fearing them. The samurai Miyamoto Musashi won 60 duels not by accepting every challenge, but by timing them, sometimes waiting years for the right moment to strike. The entrepreneur doesn't sue every critic, he outbuilds them. The father doesn't escalate every playground clash. He teaches his son when to stand ground and when to smile and walk. Here's the litmus test. Will this matter in 5 years? If not, let it pass like a ship in the night, because the man who masters battle selection doesn't just win fights, he transcends them. And in a world desperate to drag you into its chaos, that's the ultimate power. A man without conviction is a ship without ballast, tossed by every wave of opinion, easily capsized by the slightest storm. The 23rd Stoic Code cuts through this modern malaise. Develop unshakable convictions, not rigid dogmatism, but principles forged in the fires of reason and tested against reality. Consider Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood alone against Julius Caesar's rise to tyranny. While others bent to political winds, today praising Caesar, tomorrow denouncing him, Cato never wavered. He wore HIS Chinese letter toga-like armor, voted against power grabs even when outnumbered, and famously ended every Senate speech with the same phrase, "Carthage must be destroyed," a reminder that principles outlast personalities. When Caesar finally seized control, Cato chose suicide over submission, slicing open his own belly rather than live under a dictator's shadow, his final act. Reading Plato's Phaedo on immortality, a last rebuke to those who valued survival over integrity, modern men drown in moral relativity. Social media algorithms reward performative outrage, where yesterday's villains become today's heroes based on trending hashtags. Politicians flip-flop for polls, celebrities apologize for decade-old jokes, and ordinary men reshape their beliefs to fit workplace cultures or first-date conversations. The Stoics called this doxa the slavery to popular opinion. Epictetus, born a slave, taught that freedom begins when you stop asking, "What do others think?" and start asking, "What is true?" His metaphor was brutal. If someone handed your body to any passerby to use as they pleased, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who insults you, allowing it to be troubled and confused. Unshakable convictions demand discernment, not stubbornness. The Stoics weren't ideologues, they adjusted tactics while holding fast to core virtues. When Marcus Aurelius faced rebellious Germanic tribes, he didn't stubbornly insist on Roman superiority. He studied their tactics, adopted their guerrilla strategies, and still upheld his duty to protect Rome. Contrast that with modern men who cling to outdated views because they're outdated, mistaking contrarianism for principle. Real conviction isn't refusing to learn, it's refusing to compromise on truth once found. Practical training begins with vetting your beliefs. The Stoics practiced prosouch constant attention to whether their actions aligned with their professed values. Try this, list your 5 non-negotiable principles. Now audit last week's choices. Did you defend the quiet colleague bullied in meetings, pay the full tax bill instead of creative accounting? Speak truth when silence was safer. The Spartans tested boys by forcing them to steal, not to reward theft but to punish getting caught. The lesson: if you claim loyalty as a virtue but betray friends under pressure, you don't lack loyalty, you lack authenticity. The cost of conviction is often isolation. Cato died alone in Utica, his allies already surrendered. Socrates drank hemlock while his students wept, but the Stoic masculine frame measures success by internal metrics. Seneca wrote from exile, "A throne doesn't make a king, many reign while seated on no throne at all." Modern applications: the whistleblower losing his job for exposing corruption. The father refusing to badmouth his ex-wife to his children. These men might lose by worldly standards, but they win where it counts, in the silent courtroom of their own conscience. Weakness conflates flexibility with fluidity. There's nobility in changing your mind when presented with new evidence, but not in reshaping your soul for convenience. The samurai Miyamoto Musashi lived by "doubt nothing but be ready to discard everything." That's the balance: hold principles fiercely but hold truth fiercer. When Theodore Roosevelt was shot before a speech, he paused to confirm his lung wasn't hit, then spoke for 90 minutes, declaring, "It takes more than that to kill a bull moose." His conviction wasn't recklessness, it was the calculated choice that some ideas must be voiced, even at personal risk. Here's the litmus test: if no one would ever know, would you still act the same? That's where conviction lives, not in performances for applause, but in choices made in darkness. Because the man who stands firm when the crowd scatters doesn't just hold beliefs. He becomes them. A life lived solely for oneself is a life half-lived, a truth the Stoics carved into the bedrock of their philosophy. The 24th code isn't about altruism or moral posturing. It's about expanding your circle of concern until your purpose outgrows your ego. Modern men chase clout, likes, and personal optimization, mistaking self-absorption for success. The Stoics measured a man's worth by the wake he left behind. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling the known world, wrote in his private journal, "What benefits the hive benefits the bee. That's the heart of it, not self-denial, but self-elevation through service." The Spartan king Agesilaus didn't dine in palaces while his soldiers starved. He ate the same black broth and slept on the same hard ground. Why? Because leadership isn't about privilege, it's about proof. A man who builds his legacy on service isn't just remembered, he becomes indispensable. Consider two fathers. The first spends his weekends chasing personal bests at the gym, posting curated glimpses of his perfect life online. The second teaches his son to build a fire, coaches his daughter's soccer team, and volunteers nights at the local Veterans Hall. Both are strong, but only one is strong for something. The Stoics called this sympatheia the interconnectedness of all things. Your strength isn't a trophy to admire, it's a tool to uplift. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, spent his fortune not on villas but on loans to struggling families, not for repayment but for the simple act of enabling dignity. His lesson: no man can live well if he lives only for himself. Modern culture glorifies the self-made myth, ignoring that every man stands on the shoulders of those who came before. The Roman legions didn't conquer continents through lone wolves. They moved as a testudo, a tortoise formation where each shield protected the man beside him. Practical applications: mentor a younger colleague without expecting credit. Plant trees whose shade you'll never sit under. The Japanese concept of ikigai, finding purpose at the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, and what the world needs, is pure Stoicism in action. Legacy isn't about statues or surnames, it's about ripples. When Cato the Younger walked Rome's streets, pickpockets paused their thefts, not because he arrested them, but because his mere presence shamed them into decency. That's the power of living for something larger. Contrast that with today's influencers who measure impact in follower counts while their real-world communities crumble. The Stoic masculine frame rejects this emptiness. Epictetus, the crippled slave who taught emperors, put it bluntly, "What are you here for? To please yourself? Then go breed racehorses. Men are made for something higher." The ultimate test: ask yourself, if I vanished tomorrow, who besides my immediate family would feel the loss? Not the vague sadness of an absent social media presence, but the real void, the mentee who loses his compass, the neighbor who misses your snow shoveling, the local shop that loses your patronage. Because the man who serves a purpose greater than himself doesn't just leave a mark, he becomes foundation, and in a world starving for substance, that's the rarest kind of strength. Death comes for every man, but not every man truly dies. The 25th and ultimate Stoic code pulverizes modern obsessions with viral fame and bank balances. Leave a legacy of virtue. Not statues or Wikipedia pages, but an echo of excellence that outlasts flesh. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, not happiness in the fleeting sense, but a life so well lived its ripple effects defy time. Consider Thrasea Paetus, the Roman senator who faced Nero's executioners with a blade to his veins. As his lifeblood spilled, his final act wasn't a scream or a plea, it was calling his quaestor closer to witness how a free man dies. That moment, preserved in Tacitus' annals, became a rallying cry for later Stoics resisting tyranny. His corpse decayed, but his defiance fueled rebellion centuries later. That's immortality, not in avoiding death, but in making death irrelevant. Modern men chase legacy through sterile metrics, net worth listed on Forbes, followers tallied on Instagram, trophies gleaming in cabinets. The Stoics would have pitied this smallness. When Seneca wrote, "Life is short, but virtue makes it long," he wasn't speaking metaphorically. A miser's gold outlives him only until the next air blows it. A warrior's courage, like the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, reverberates across millennia. Your name may fade, but the standard you set, that becomes oxygen for future men gasping in weakness's vacuum. The Stoic blueprint for eternal impact hinges on 3 pillars. First, live your philosophy visibly. Musonius Rufus didn't just teach Stoicism. He embodied it by gardening in exile, proving happiness needs no audience. Centuries later, Marcus Aurelius would cite him as inspiration during Rome's darkest plagues. Second, plant seeds you'll never sit under. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, perished in a shipwreck, but his students mentored emperors. Third, let death sharpen, not paralyze. When the Stoic poet Lucan was ordered to commit suicide by Nero, he recited his own verses as he bled out, turning his execution into a masterclass on art outlasting tyrants. Legacy isn't about being remembered, it's about being useful beyond your expiration date. Cotto's suicide didn't stop Caesar's rise, but it lit a fire in Brutus that would later strike the dictator down. Modern applications: the teacher who instills grit in students who'll outpace him, the craftsman who builds bridges he'll never cross. Even in failure, virtue leaves tracks. After the Stoic rebel Soranus was executed, his daughter Servilia followed him to the grave, but not before smuggling his writings to safety. Those scrolls would later fortify Marcus Aurelius. Here's the Stoic paradox: the man who stops chasing immortality becomes immortal, not in marble or myth, but in the quiet moments when a stranger reads his words and stands a little straighter. When a father tells his son, act like Cotto, without knowing why. When you face your own Nero, whether a corrupt boss, a terminal diagnosis, or life's daily betrayals, and hear the whisper of Thracia's blade, this is how a free man dies. Not with a whimper, but with a lesson, because the ultimate masculine frame isn't built for your lifetime. It's built for eternity. Here's the blueprint: 25 codes forged in the fires of discipline, battle-tested across millennia, now yours to wield. This isn't just a philosophy, it's an operating system for masculine excellence. From mastering perception to leaving a legacy, each principle interlocks like armor plating, transforming you into the kind of man who doesn't just survive chaos, he commands it. The Stoic masculine frame isn't about suppressing emotion or flexing Stoic indifference. It's about channeling raw human energy into unshakable action. Where modern men crumble under criticism, you'll dissect it for truth. Where they chase cheap dopamine, you'll crave the burn of growth. Where they blame the world, you'll own every outcome. Look around. The modern male is a cautionary tale, softened by convenience, addicted to validation, paralyzed by options. He confuses opinions with principles, likes with respect, comfort with living. He's a walking contradiction, obsessed with alpha posturing but crumbling when Wi-Fi drops. The Stoic, he's the antidote. While the masses scroll, he studies. While they complain, he adapts. While they seek permission, he acts. The difference isn't genetics or luck, it's code. The Spartans didn't birth warriors, they built them through relentless conditioning. You're holding the same blueprint, but knowledge without action is vanity. So here's your trial by fire. Pick one code today and live it ruthlessly for 7 days. Not the easiest, the one that terrifies you. Maybe it's voluntary hardship, sleeping on the floor to reset your comfort threshold, or radical ownership, admitting where you've been lying to yourself. Or memento mori, writing your eulogy to clarify what actually matters. This is your gauntlet. The man you'll become isn't hiding in another podcast or book. He's waiting on the other side of action. The arena gates are open. The crowd's roar is static. Step forward. Comment below with your chosen code, not as a promise, but as a declaration. Because the world doesn't need more men who talk about philosophy. It needs men who live it. The crisis ends where you begin. Now